You know how some names just float through a city and make even the wildest wolves hush up? There's always that one story folks keep whispering about, always in pieces, never the whole truth, just enough to make you wonder what really happened and why this one dude outlasted so many. Why even the dirtiest, coldest gangsters kept their distance, and why every block in Brooklyn seemed to know his face but never really knew the full story behind those eyes. So, what really made him untouchable? Back in the day, if you told somebody you were from East New York, Brooklyn, you didn't have to say much else because anybody who knew the city already understood what that meant. By the early 70s, you could walk down Pitkin Avenue and see whole blocks of empty lots, fire hydrants busted open, and little kids running wild because their folks were hustling just to keep food on the table. The numbers didn't lie. In 1970, more than 160,000 manufacturing jobs disappeared from New York City, and East New York took the worst of it, with whole families pushed out by landlords torching buildings for insurance, leaving miles of abandoned shells behind. By the late 70s, the crack and heroin trade turned these blocks into battlegrounds, with every corner watched by stick-up kids and crews who didn't blink when things got ugly. The people here weren't just Black, Puerto Rican, or Caribbean. They were all caught up in a storm that didn't care about color, only survival. Puerto Rican families started coming heavy after World War II, settling in the same streets as Black families pushed out of Bed-Stuy and Brownsville, everybody fighting for a spot. Some folks like to say it was just about poverty, but the truth is, by the time the mid-80s hit, East New York had become a graveyard for a whole generation, with more bodies every year than you could count on your hands. Police barely showed up unless somebody got shot, and even then, most folks knew not to say nothing, because tomorrow the same problem would still be there, just a different name on the wall. It's hard to picture now, but back then, it felt like the rest of New York gave up on this side of Brooklyn, leaving behind broken schools, burnt-out playgrounds, and so much empty space the city called parts of it the wasteland. You could walk 2 blocks and see 10 junkies nodding off, then step around the corner and see brand new Benzes parked outside dice games that ran all night. If you wanted to make it, you had to move smart, stay quiet, and make sure your name didn't get mixed up in too much drama. By the time Jesus Valentine was coming up, these streets had rules, but nobody bothered to write them down. Every lesson got paid for in blood or reputation, and a mistake could get you gone by sundown. For the kids growing up, the choices didn't really look like choices at all, just ways to survive one more day. You saw your moms cleaning floors or your pops pulling doubles at the plant, barely scraping by, while the hustlers out front wore gold ropes and pushed fresh rides through the block. Even the teachers gave up trying to keep you in class when outside, crews were making more money before noon than a principal saw all year. Some jumped into the dope game because the hunger hit first, others because they didn't want to get preyed on, and everybody learned quick that looking too soft got you tested. By the early 80s, East New York was running with crews like the Tomahawks, the Untouchables, and smaller Puerto Rican cliques. Turf got carved up so tight you needed to know which side of the street you were on before you even opened your mouth. But this wasn't just about guns and money. Out here, your name was your shield and your weapon, something that could feed your family or get you caught up, and nobody handed out second chances. Reputation was built slow, one move at a time. Maybe you broke bread with the right people, maybe you held your tongue when things got tense, maybe you stepped in when your little brother was about to get washed for his sneakers. Everybody remembered the big names, Domencio Benson, Mike Tyson coming through before he was champ, the A-team running the streets. But in this jungle, most folks ended up as rumors or chalk outlines, never legends. The city's newspapers wrote about urban decay and gang violence, but nobody in East New York waited around for a headline. They just adapted. Crews worked the blocks on shifts, eyes everywhere, young runners carrying messages, girls holding work, and older heads teaching you how to spot the cops who didn't wear uniforms. Loyalty wasn't just some word to talk about, it kept you breathing, made sure your family didn't have to bury you. Betrayal didn't come with warnings, just sirens and phone calls in the middle of the night. The whole place moved on trust, paranoia, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, you could stack enough to get your people out. Some ran the numbers game, some juggled dope, others got into stolen cars, but it all came back to survival and respect. Every block had somebody watching, every store had a back room for business, and every legend came up learning the real street curriculum. Don't talk too much, watch who you trust, never let them see you desperate, and always keep something set aside for the rainy days. When the murder rate shot up in 1985, nobody acted surprised, not in East New York. Homicides doubled in Brooklyn over 10 years, and the police just put up more tape and kept it moving. Kids grew up learning to spot an undercover by his shoes, hearing stories about whose body got found behind the bodega, and which crews were hungry enough to try something desperate. Everybody, and I mean everybody, knew that one wrong step could get your whole family touched. In this kind of jungle, you had to figure out fast, were you going to be a sheep or a wolf? Did you want to watch the game from the benches or step out and make your own rules? For most, the streets picked them before they even made a choice. But if you moved right, if you learned how to read the room, if you stayed solid, your name could echo out past the block, past the haters, past the headlines, and maybe, just maybe, become something bigger than the streets that built you. You can trace every big legend back to something simple, and with Jesus Valentine, it starts with a cold winter night, Christmas Eve, 1964, when the city was covered in frost, and his family was just trying to make ends meet in Brooklyn. His grandmother was the type of woman who put faith before everything, lighting candles, saying prayers over every meal, and telling her daughter that this child was special, naming him after the Savior because she believed names held real weight out here. His moms worked long hours, his pops kept 2 jobs, and every morning, Jesus would be the first one up, helping his siblings get ready, learning early that if you didn't handle business, nobody else would step up for you. With 5 kids running through a cramped apartment, things could get loud and messy, but Jesus always played the oldest, the peacemaker, making sure nobody in the family went to bed hungry and never letting outside trouble reach their doorstep. That was the first real lesson. Your name is only as good as how you treat your own people, because nobody in these streets gives out respect for free, and in East New York, a lot of folks just waited for you to slip. When his family moved from one part of Brooklyn to East New York, the stakes changed overnight, with blocks full of wild kids, corners that felt like war zones, and hustlers showing off new whips while the rest of the world barely noticed you existed. Jesus wasn't born a hustler, but it didn't take long before the streets started teaching him how to move. He saw the older heads on the block, flashy with their Kangos and big chains, but he noticed the ones who survived kept things close, only spoke when it mattered, and always made sure their folks got looked after. He would walk with his younger siblings past dice games and burn out lots, hearing grown men talk about hits, beefs, and business like it was regular 9-to-5 work. It wasn't just about who was the toughest. It was about who could make the right moves at the right time and who never let their mouth write a check their body couldn't cash. One afternoon he broke a rule, riding his bike when his uncle said not to, and it changed everything. He caught a car straight to the ground, and the cops didn't even bother to take him to the hospital, just tossed him back to his family like he didn't matter, leaving his grandmother heated and his parents feeling like nobody cared about their kind. He spent months healing up, but that wasn't the end of the story, because when he turned 18, Jesus filed a lawsuit against the city for how they handled it, winning a settlement that put real money in his hands at an age when most of his friends had never seen more than a couple $100s at once. That was a turning point, and it showed what made him different. He could have blown it all on jewelry, new sneakers, or parties, but instead he used the cash as seed money, flipping it into something bigger. While most teenagers were out chasing girls or living wild, Jesus started building, learning how to make every dollar work, stacking, and watching every move. He bought a little product, moved small at first, and put his brothers on to watch his back, building trust from the inside out. He didn't jump out there trying to be the loudest or the biggest, but every week his name got a little stronger, with more people whispering about that Puerto Rican kid who never seemed to get caught slipping. Even the crews in the neighborhood started noticing him because he didn't ask for handouts, didn't run to anybody for help, and always broke bread with the right people. His grandmother's words stuck with him. Never let the world change your heart, but don't ever let the world play you for a fool. Jesus watched the OGs, Demencio Benson making moves with the A-Team, Mike Tyson training at the local gym before he was the champ, AZ Faison moving uptown money through Harlem. And he saw that the ones who lasted were the ones who kept their family tight and never let their business get messy. Growing up in those years, you learned quick that the block didn't care about excuses, only results, and nobody gave you respect unless you earned it day by day. Jesus took jobs at the gas station, sweeping floors, stacking chips until he saw what hustlers were pulling up in. Gold ropes, clean rides, pockets full of cash, and realized that hard work alone wouldn't get you out. He started hustling small, staying low, keeping every dollar clean, and making sure his siblings got what they needed before he spent on himself. The streets kept testing him, but every time somebody tried to play him, Jesus found a way to flip the situation, either by talking smart, moving quick, or keeping his crew close enough to stop trouble before it started. Some kids broke under the pressure, turned to heavy drugs, or caught beef over nothing, but Jesus stayed focused, knowing every block was watching, Every move mattered, and you could lose everything in a heartbeat if you didn't play your cards right. When his family struggled, he didn't go crying to outsiders. He handled it in-house, making sure his little brothers got shoes for school and his moms didn't have to worry about rent. The early 80s brought new faces, new threats, and new opportunities, with crews from Cypress Hills, Brownsville, and Bed-Stuy trying to muscle into East New York. But Jesus learned how to play politics, using words when fists didn't work, and never showing too much, always keeping his plans tight. He started learning from the mistakes of others. Never flash too early, never brag about what you haven't earned, and never trust a promise that sounds too good. By his late teens, Jesus was the one people came to for advice, the one who could get you out of a jam without ever raising his voice, the one who remembered every lesson his grandmother taught about loyalty and pride. He watched his friends drop out, disappear, or catch time, and he swore to himself that his bloodline wouldn't end up another sad story in East New York. That's the code he lived by. Keep your circle tight, never get desperate, always make the next move before your enemies, and if you catch a win, flip it into something bigger. Never let the game play you, never let the city decide your future, and always remember who's counting on you to bring it home. That's what set Jesus Valentine apart before anybody ever called him a legend, and that's how his name started echoing through every block, every barbershop, and every dice game in Brooklyn. The way you move in East New York sets the tone, and by the early 80s, Jesus Valentine started showing the city what real discipline looked like. His first moves were quiet, stacking product, making sure every dollar got put back in, and using the lawsuit settlement money as capital. He watched the old heads and clocked which blocks moved heavy, paying attention to who had real control and who just talked a good game. Pitkin and Logan, that intersection in Brooklyn, was the place where a hustler could go from small change to big respect, and by the time Jesus locked it down, the word on the street was he ran it like a business. It wasn't about just standing on a corner, it was about building a system that never slept, keeping things moving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The spot ran shifts like a factory, with runners passing off work, lookouts on every corner, and trusted lieutenants making sure no short count ever slipped past. Jesus kept his inner circle tight, pulling in people he trusted, and making sure that every move benefited the crew before anyone else. His little brothers worked the door, while cousins kept track of money, and his oldest friend from school handled supply, making the operation a family thing before anybody else even tried to get in. People in East New York said Pitkin and Logan made more money in a week than some clubs in Manhattan, and the spot brought in serious numbers. At its peak, up to $120,000 a day. Word spread, and even old school hustlers like Kendu and one-armed Monk started noticing the grind. Jesus wasn't just the boss, he made sure everybody ate, and that loyalty paid off because nobody wanted to cross a man who always looked out for his own. His system kept things smooth, with people working in teams, and always two shooters around, watching the block from opposite angles. Discipline was everything. You didn't get a spot at Pitkin and Logan by asking for favors, you earned it by proving you could hold it down. Jesus put the word out early that he didn't want anyone drawing heat, so no loud colors, no wild parties on the block, and no talking business where kids could hear. Every new recruit got a simple rule. If you can't keep your mouth shut, you can't work here, and if you mess up, you bring it to the family first, not the street. The business was run tight, and even the competition respected the way things moved. Police tried to set up stings, but by the time they got close, someone on the payroll had already made a call, and Jesus' runners switched up routes, using side doors and alleyways. Every corner boy wanted to know who the boss was, but Jesus didn't flex for outsiders, and he never bragged unless it was to remind his crew what was possible if you stayed focused. He was careful about showing off, only pulling out big whips or heavy jewelry when it mattered, and always making sure to pay his shooters before he paid himself. When Pitkin and Logan started making real money, everybody wanted in, but Jesus kept the roster small, making sure every face was family or a friend who'd proven themselves in tight spots. That loyalty showed up in every dice game, every street party, and every funeral, with the crew showing up together, moving as one unit. People talk about $120,000 a day like it's just a number, but in the early 80s, that kind of money meant real power. You could buy out whole blocks, pay rent for half the neighborhood, and walk into any club from Brooklyn to Harlem with your head high. Jesus flipped that money into cars, stores, and stashed property, never keeping too much in one place. He had eyes everywhere, using cousins and old friends as lookouts, and made sure every rival knew that if they tried to take a block, they'd have to deal with the whole Valentine family, not just one man. Pitkin and Logan stayed open around the clock, and the crew rotated in shifts. Nobody worked longer than 6 hours, so nobody ever got sloppy. If trouble came through, shooters posted up, and Jesus made sure every angle was covered. Some say he even paid off an NYPD sergeant to keep the block safe, with information moving from the precinct to his ear before raids ever happened. That's the kind of detail that gave him an edge, letting him shut down the block for an hour if the heat got too close, then open back up with new faces and new stash spots. People in Brooklyn started whispering about the way Jesus managed things, and his name started spreading from Pitkin and Logan to Harlem, to the Bronx, even as far as Queensbridge. He never moved reckless, never showed his whole hand, and made sure his runners understood the value of silence. The rule was simple. If you want to stay rich, you stay humble, and you never let ego write a check you can't cash. Jesus watched as other crews tried to get big quick, flexing loud and making enemies, and saw how fast those names disappeared when the police came knocking or when a rival put a bounty out. He took advice from legends like A.Z. Faison, who showed him the value of staying in the shadows, and he listened to stories about what happened to crews who got too greedy. Some hustlers only lasted a season, but Jesus made sure Pitkin and Logan kept running for years, never letting the quality drop or the vibe get sloppy. Every dollar moved was accounted for, and every runner knew that snitching or stealing meant you'd be gone before the sun came up. The code was tight, and respect came not just from muscle, but from brains. Jesus put family first, kept his shooters loyal with real pay, and showed love to the community by giving back, buying groceries for old heads, throwing block parties for the kids, and making sure nobody in the crew went hungry. He didn't need a big speech, just results, and that's what got him respect from people like Ross' son and One-Armed Monk, who had their own corners but always paid homage when they saw the Valentin crew. Pitkin and Logan became the kind of spot where hustlers from other boroughs would stop by, not to cause trouble, but to learn how real money moved. You could catch people like Domencio Benson pulling up in Benzes, or Mike Tyson stopping by before he went pro, soaking up the game before the city put his name in lights. Jesus kept things business, never mixing family with street drama, and always shutting down nonsense before it started. If somebody got too hot or started drawing too much attention, they got pulled off the line, no questions, just replaced with someone who knew how to play their position. Running a block like Pitkin and Logan meant you needed more than just muscle. You needed discipline and vision. Jesus taught his crew how to blend in, how to spot police by the way they walked, and how to read the energy of a room before you stepped in. He held meetings at odd hours, switched up locations, and always kept a couple of safe houses ready in case things went sideways. The Valentin crew wasn't just about hustling, it was about outlasting the competition, and that's how Jesus kept the block running strong. People like to talk about legends, but in Brooklyn, legend status only comes if you can protect what you build and keep your people out of the pen or the graveyard. Jesus built his empire by putting family first, keeping every move quiet, and never letting outsiders see how deep the operation ran. That's what turned a local hustle into a citywide name, and why even today, people talk about Pitkin and Logan with respect, knowing that the Valentin crew set a standard nobody else could touch. When a hustler's name starts moving through more than just one block, you know he's doing something right. And by the mid-'80s, Jesus Valentin's moves brought him into circles where only the heaviest hitters survived. East New York was full of crews fighting for respect, but the A-team set themselves apart, and Jesus built real ties with Kendu, One-Armed Monk, and Ross' son. The A-team got money all over Brooklyn, keeping their operation smooth, never letting outsiders catch a weak spot. They didn't just respect anybody, so when they started treating Jesus like family, people on the street knew his name had real weight. Kendu, known for his cold focus and wild loyalty, watched Jesus stack chips without drama, while One-Armed Monk, even after losing an arm, kept running the block like he never missed a step. Ross' son handled politics, making sure the crew could handle beef without ever drawing police to the scene, and that's the kind of discipline Jesus respected. Linking up with the A-team meant more than sharing corners. It meant sharing secrets, spreading out risk, and never having to worry about getting snaked by your own. Jesus moved smart, always with his own bread, never borrowing, never asking for favors, and that made every alliance feel solid, not shaky. Some hustlers got known for flexing borrowed money, flashing borrowed cars, or calling on the next man when things got tight, but Jesus never moved like that. He walked into dice games with his own bankroll, never looking at another man's pockets, and paid his shooters before anybody could even ask. When crews came together to settle beef, his voice carried weight, because he was never begging for help, always negotiating from a spot of power. That gave him freedom to walk through Harlem, Brownsville, or Cypress Hills, never worried about getting pressed by the wrong squad. The A-Team and the Valentin crew blended like family at block parties, Harlem dice games, and funerals where Brooklyn's legends paid their respects. Jesus was careful to keep things business, never letting crew drama spill over into money moves, and that discipline saved lives more than once. Sometimes, police would roll through trying to shake things up, and because Jesus kept his ear to the street, someone in the precinct would tip him off, letting the A-Team move product without losing sleep. When trouble did come, the A-Team handled things with brains before bullets, talking out problems, paying off the right people, and making sure nobody crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed. Jesus never got caught in petty wars, always walking away from drama that could draw police or get somebody in the crew hit for nothing. People noticed because it takes guts to step back from a fight, and it takes real power to keep getting money when other crews are losing their best soldiers. In the mid-'80s, hustlers like Domencio Benson and the A-Team built alliances that changed the way money moved in Brooklyn. Jesus saw that loyalty meant more than muscle, so he brought his brothers and cousins in, kept women around who could hold their own, and only worked with people who put family over everything. He didn't care about loud names, just results, and that's why other crews started copying his playbook, rotating shifts, keeping security tight, and making sure every man knew the rules before stepping on the block. East New York didn't give out second chances, so Jesus made sure he didn't need one, and he watched as other crews lost blocks to infighting, bad business, or just moving too loud. When one armed monk needed backup, Jesus' shooters came through, no questions asked, and when the Valentin crew needed intel on a new threat, the A-Team sent word, making sure everybody moved as one. These alliances didn't happen overnight. They were built on years of solid business, shared danger, and always breaking bread when things went right. Police reports from the mid-'80s show how often the same names kept popping up on corners, from Brownsville to Flatbush, but Jesus and the A-Team never let heat last too long in one spot. They switched up product, routes, and faces, letting the law chase shadows while the money kept moving. The Valentin crew got known for being untouchable, not just for having shooters, but for moving with respect, paying dues, and keeping drama off the main stage. When a rival tried to start something, it rarely turned into a headline because Jesus and the A-Team would pull up, talk it out, and make the beef disappear before the city even knew something was up. That's how you survive in a place where legends turn into ghosts overnight. And Jesus kept proving you could get money, keep your name clean, and still walk anywhere in Brooklyn without looking over your shoulder. The A-Team Alliance showed every young hustler what could happen if you mixed brains, muscle, and loyalty, and Jesus stayed at the center. Showing respect got you further than flexing. The Valentin name kept rising, and by the late 80s, anybody who mattered in East New York knew that rolling with Jesus meant you didn't just survive, you thrived. If you ever walk through Brooklyn in the late 80s, you see names ringing out, but none hit like Mike Tyson or Jesus Valentin. Tyson grew up on Amboy Street in Brownsville, just a couple subway stops from where Jesus built his name. The first time they crossed paths, it wasn't some Hollywood moment. It was regular, two local kids who understood struggle and who learned quick how fast a name could change your life. Tyson started boxing at the local gyms, first with Customato and Catskill, but before he was the champ, he was just another hungry face around Brownsville, learning to move through tough crowds. Jesus saw Tyson working and respected the grind, never treating him like some future celebrity, just another guy trying to make it out. Most hustlers in the neighborhood tried to ride Tyson's coattails, asking for tickets, for cars, or for some cash to float a debt. But Jesus never came begging, not once. When Tyson started coming up, winning fights and stacking checks, he looked back at who showed love before the lights, and Jesus was always solid, always there, never looking for a handout. That built the kind of friendship where real respect got earned, and nobody ever had to question motives. They started running in the same circles, showing up at Harlem parties, dice games uptown, and big events where athletes, hustlers, and rappers blended in like it was regular. Jesus never acted starstruck, and that's why Tyson kept him close, knowing that no matter how loud the cameras got, Jesus kept things cool. Even as Tyson's money started rolling in, he never forgot how Jesus once floated him when times got tight, making sure the young champ didn't have to beg anybody else for a ride or a meal. Jesus might have had the street hustle, but he looked out for people on their way up, and Tyson always respected that. At the peak of Tyson's career, when he was knocking out Michael Spinks and Larry Holmes, he came back to Brooklyn to show love, and always checked in with Jesus. Stories say Tyson tried to pull Jesus into the legitimate world, even offering him $1 million to leave the streets behind, run business for him, and stay close to the big money. Jesus just laughed, seeing that as crumbs because the blocks at Pitkin and Logan had already seen more than that in a single week, and his Harlem stores were moving money Tyson never even saw. Turning down that $1 million offer might sound wild, but to Jesus, working for Tyson wasn't the same as running your own world. He didn't want a boss, didn't want to take orders, and always wanted to control how he moved. The street respected independence, and the fact that he never once asked Tyson for favors made their friendship stand out, with Tyson going out of his way to show love back. People in Harlem saw Tyson give Jesus cars, custom gear, and invite him to events where most hustlers never got in, and every time Jesus showed up, he looked like the one who belonged, not just some guest. The flex was real. In the mid-'80s, Jesus and Tyson started pulling up in rare rides, not just the usual Benz or BMW, but the Lamborghini LM002, a car almost nobody in New York had ever seen. Only 300 of those trucks existed in the world, and one was rolling through Brooklyn, Harlem, and East New York with Jesus behind the wheel. Getting that LM002 wasn't just about money. It took real connections, with a woman in the military and a cop on payroll making it happen, flying the vehicle in when customs would have stopped any regular person at the docks. When they hit Rucker Park or came through Harlem, people's heads turned, knowing only someone with serious pull could pull that off. The stories about that Lamborghini spread fast, and so did the tales of Jesus's all-white Mercedes 600, the kind of whip nobody else in the city touched at the time. At Rucker Park Championship Day, Puff Daddy might have shown up in a black Benz 500, but it was Jesus who made the block stop, coming solo, rocking heavy ropes, no entourage, and taking the shine from every celebrity in the stands. That kind of flex wasn't just about looking good, it was about marketing, showing the block that a hustler could stand taller than rappers or athletes, and that sometimes the game picked its own icons. It wasn't just about cars and jewelry. The culture shifted when hustlers like Jesus started getting copied by the same stars who once wanted to be nothing like the street. Rappers came to the Harlem store for the latest sneakers. Athletes stopped by for a chance to see how Jesus moved, and everyone wanted to wear what he wore, from the ropes to the Jesus piece. The reason was simple. Jesus represented a version of success that didn't ask for permission, didn't fake for the cameras, and didn't fold when the city changed the rules. Tyson stayed close for years, popping in and out of Brooklyn even after the fame hit, never turning his back on Jesus and always making sure their friendship stayed solid. That kind of bond meant something in New York, a city where most relationships turned shaky when money got involved. In the end, Jesus and Tyson stood as proof that power respected power, and that the right moves could keep your name ringing out in every borough, no matter how high you climbed or how far you ran from where you started. The city never really slept, and neither did Jesus, who lived for that late-night energy where money, ego, and danger all showed up at the same table. In East New York, dice games ran deep, not just as a hustle, but as a battleground where respect got won and lost. You could find Jesus at a backroom game in Harlem, or out on the stoop in Brooklyn, rolling with the kind of cats who never blinked when thousands changed hands. These games weren't just about luck. They were about reading faces, calling bluffs, and making sure nobody left the table feeling like they'd been played. Some of the wildest stories on the block started with dice, where hustlers like AZ Faison and Domencio Benson would come through to test the city's best. Jesus never backed down from a big money throw, and he made sure every move got watched, every side bet got honored, and no sucker ever snuck in the room. The crowd was always thick, with Harlem heavyweights and Brooklyn's A-team blending into the smoke, and if you couldn't keep your cool when the pressure hit, you didn't belong at that table. More than once, the dice games went left, with tempers running hot and guns making an appearance before the night was over. Jesus got caught in that smoke, taking bullets more than once, including a Harlem dice game where he caught 2 shots but still walked out with his head high. Most cats would have turned the city upside down looking for revenge, but Jesus knew that retaliation just brought more heat, more bodies, and more police on the block. He made a point to play chess, not checkers, choosing when to move and when to hold back, because the money always needed protecting more than the ego did. The street kept a scorecard, and everybody in East New York watched to see if Jesus would go for payback, but he never let anger get in the way of business. Word spread that he kept at least 2 shooters close, and everybody knew not to cross a man who played the long game. Sometimes it was better to let the wolves know you were still standing, still getting money, and still able to make things happen without having to pull a trigger every time someone tried to test you. That's the kind of discipline that turned near misses into lessons and made sure the next shooter thought twice before coming for the king. Being at the center of that dice culture meant Jesus got to see who was solid and who just wanted to make noise. He moved between boroughs, showing up at games in Harlem, the Bronx, or Brownsville, always keeping his circle tight, never bragging, just letting the money and the reputation do the talking. Some dice games went big with six-figure pots, and nobody walked in without an invite or some serious muscle. Even when the NYPD tried to crack down, sending undercovers through the crowd, Jesus always had a heads up, pulling out before the raids dropped and never leaving a trail for the law to follow. The dice weren't just about stacking chips, they were about reading the street, sizing up new threats, and letting everybody know you could hold your own without getting loud. Jesus played with people who had their own crews, sometimes sitting across from men who ran rival corners, but he never let the game turn personal unless it had to. He had a rule: don't bet what you can't lose, and don't trust anybody who gets too friendly when the money's good. That mindset kept him from getting lined up by jealous faces and helped him spot the snakes before they bit. Gun violence always lingered, with people remembering every old beef and never forgetting who caught a stray. Jesus survived 3 different shootings, each time coming back stronger, but never letting the city see him sweat. Some say he even got tipped off by an NYPD sergeant on the payroll, which gave him an edge that most hustlers would kill for. He used that advantage to keep his circle safe, switching up routines, moving dice games to new spots, and always keeping the exit clear in case things got wild. If someone tried to start trouble, Jesus would pull back, count his wins, and come back stronger, always letting the block know he moved on his own terms. Survival in East New York wasn't about muscle alone. It was about patience, knowing when to walk away, and understanding that every ego boost came with a price. Jesus played the long game, building his reputation off wisdom, not just bravado, and letting the city see that a real boss never let small beefs get in the way of the bag. Dice games taught him to read people, and gun violence showed him which moves mattered, but the real code came from knowing how to keep getting money when the odds turned against you. Every street legend in Brooklyn, from one-armed monk to Ross' son, respected Jesus for that balance, knowing he didn't fold under pressure, didn't chase clout, and never let a loud mouth get him in trouble. Hustlers from Harlem to Cypress Hills watched how he played chess, not checkers, keeping the focus on the end game and making sure every dollar stacked up clean. He'd say, don't go starting a war just to win a headline, and don't risk your family for bragging rights, because in the end, the only thing that mattered was keeping your name good and your crew safe. Through all the danger, all the gambling, and all the heat, Jesus kept rolling, always coming back to the table with something to prove, and always leaving with his respect intact. The dice were just another tool, another way to test loyalty, and another arena where discipline separated the real bosses from the loud pretenders. In a city where too many hustlers faded out before their name even reached the next block, Jesus kept the code alive, showing Brooklyn that survival meant playing smart, not just playing hard. If you want to know how the real power players survived East New York in the mid-'80s, you got to look past just the muscle and the money and check who had real protection on the inside. NYPD corruption was wild in those days, with stories coming out every month about cops running side hustles, flipping evidence, or turning a blind eye if the envelope was right. Jesus Valentine knew the game better than most, and that's why he put his sergeant on the payroll before his crew got too hot, making sure every major move came with a little extra insurance. A lot of crews tried to do business without police knowing, but Jesus played things different, building a quiet relationship with a sergeant who controlled part of the local precinct and paying up front to make sure nobody in blue got too curious. It wasn't just about dodging arrests. Having the right badge in your pocket meant raids got called off, tip-offs came quick, and anybody plotting a setup got their cover blown before the block even heard a whisper. That edge gave Jesus a cushion that most hustlers never touched, letting him run shifts at Pitkin and Logan without worrying about cops busting down doors in the middle of a heavy day. The protection went both ways because the sergeant got his cut every week, no matter how slow business moved, and never had to worry about losing street respect since nobody dared to cross a cop who kept Jesus' crew safe. The word on the street was that the sergeant didn't just tip off Jesus about raids, he also helped smooth things over if a rival crew started drawing too much heat, passing word to lay low, or letting Jesus know when it was time to move product from one stash to another. People outside the game called it dirty, but in Brooklyn, it was just how things moved if you wanted to stay untouchable. East New York's streets got filled with crews who learned the hard way that police attention was deadly, with blocks getting shut down after one bad bust and whole families losing their lifeline if the wrong name came up in a precinct report. Jesus made sure his name didn't get caught in paperwork, paying the sergeant not just for himself, but to keep the Valentine crew off any radar, letting runners work in peace and making sure the cops looked the other way when his people hustled. Every time a raid hit a rival spot, the Valentine operation switched up, changing drop points, flipping work to new blocks, and moving big stashes before the law could even draw a map. Nobody talked loud about the cop on payroll, but every block in Brooklyn heard rumors, and most people knew that Jesus never got caught slipping because somebody in uniform always had his back. That kind of connection was rare, and even big crews like the A-Team or Domencio Benson's people tried to get the same setup, but few pulled it off with the same discipline. The cop's badge meant Jesus could step in clubs without getting searched, bring security to parties, and even show up at events where police were supposed to keep hustlers out. The respect went deep, with some people saying Jesus' badge was better than a bulletproof vest, letting him slide through trouble that would have shut down another man's operation in a week. Having a sergeant on call didn't make you bulletproof, but it let Jesus play chess, not checkers, always 2 moves ahead, and never letting rivals or police box him in. He used that edge to keep the Valentine name rising, outlasting other crews who fell to stings, snitches, or sloppy management. People saw the difference when police cruisers rolled past Pitkin and Logan, giving a nod, and kept driving, while other blocks got hit with lights and sirens every month. That silent agreement let the Valentine crew focus on money, family, and reputation, instead of always running from the law. It wasn't about bragging or making headlines, just business handled in the back rooms and dark alleys, where favors got traded and secrets stayed quiet. Jesus understood that the law was just another part of the street, and if you couldn't play politics, you ended up in cuffs or worse. Every smart hustler tried to learn from his example, but most just got played or paid too much for too little, missing the balance between buying safety and drawing heat. In the end, the sergeant's protection became another legend in the Valentine story, showing Brooklyn how brains, not just muscle, could keep a crew eating long after other names faded out. That edge meant Jesus didn't have to fight every battle with fists or guns. Sometimes all it took was a call, a quiet word, or a little cash in the right pocket to keep the block running strong. The Valentine legacy grew because Jesus never relied on luck, never gambled with safety, and always moved with just enough distance from the law to stay in the game year after year. When the real money started stacking up, Jesus Valentine knew it was time to step out of just hustling corners and put roots down in Harlem, where legends got made and new money turned into old money fast. He scoped out 138th Street for months, walking the block, watching the traffic, and seeing who controlled which corner, before finally buying out a storefront and flipping it into one of the wildest sneaker and jewelry shops uptown. That shop didn't just sell kicks or gold. It became a second home where Harlem's best came to flex, break bread, and talk shop without the city breathing down their necks. Word got around quick, and soon you had heads from Brooklyn, the Bronx, and even Queens showing up, not just for a fresh pair of Adidas or a new Jesus piece, but to get close to the kind of energy that only real bosses brought to the block. Jesus set the vibe. No drama, no funny business, and always real security watching the door, making sure customers felt safe, but the wrong ones never got past the front. Rappers and athletes started pulling up, seeing how the game really worked, with Jesus giving out advice, trading stories, and making sure the store stayed packed no matter what day it was. The jewelry cases stayed stocked with gold ropes, custom rings, and chains you couldn't find anywhere else, while the sneaker wall rotated every week. Always something new to keep the buzz up. People say Jesus even gave out free shoes to kids in the neighborhood, making sure Harlem felt the love and building goodwill that money alone couldn't buy. That store turned into a hub where hustlers talked politics, made alliances, and set up big moves, knowing Jesus kept his ear to the street and could broker peace before problems got too big. Harlem had always been a mix of old heads, new money, and city dreamers, but Jesus fit right in, keeping things business when others lost focus, and always bringing a little Brooklyn hustle to the table. He didn't just run one shop, he started flipping the profits into legit business moves, learning how to wash street cash and make it look like any regular store owner was stacking checks. Every receipt got tracked, every dollar got moved through a clean account, and Jesus made sure the IRS never had a reason to come looking too close. Buying property became the next step, and when 132nd Street started seeing the first signs of gentrification, Jesus jumped in early, buying up buildings that nobody else wanted. Some thought he was moving too fast, but Jesus saw what was coming, knowing that Harlem was about to flip from old money to new money, and he wanted a piece before the city's real estate sharks caught on. He turned rundown brownstones into rental spots, using cash from the shop to pay for renovations, and slowly built up a portfolio that kept paying even when the streets got too hot for hustling. Real estate brought new respect, letting Jesus host meetings for big players like Mike Tyson or Puff Daddy, and showing the block that you could get out of the game before it turned on you. People started calling the 138th Street shop the headquarters, because every major deal, every truce, and every big party seemed to come through those doors at least once. Young hustlers saw what was possible if you played your cards right, watching Jesus shift from corner boy to businessman, and realizing that street money only lasted if you found a way to make it clean. He kept Harlem buzzing by running community events, sponsoring basketball tournaments, and handing out backpacks every fall, making sure his name stayed good even with the elders who remembered the block before crack hit. Every time someone tried to bring beef to the store, security shut it down, and Jesus never let the shop become a target for stick-up kids or rivals. The reputation grew, and even when police watched the block, they couldn't find a reason to harass a store owner who paid his taxes, helped his neighbors, and ran a business as tight as any uptown bank. The sneaker and jewelry shop became a model for other hustlers looking to flip street money, and soon other crews tried to copy the formula, but nobody built the same trust or kept the same quality. Jesus never cut corners, always investing in new product, better security, and staff who knew how to keep things quiet. The store brought jobs to the block, let local kids learn business, and showed Harlem that a Brooklyn hustler could bring new life without bringing drama. By the time gentrification started changing 132nd Street for real, Jesus already owned enough property to keep eating, renting out spaces to the new money coming in, and never having to look over his shoulder. Every move got planned, every deal got vetted, and the shop on 138th became his legacy, letting his family walk through Harlem with pride. Jesus proved that the game could be flipped, that corner boys could become businessmen, and that real respect came from outlasting the streets, not just running them. The story of Jesus Valentine in Harlem showed every hustler in New York what came next, when you survived long enough to start thinking generational instead of just day to day. From 138th Street to 132nd, the blocks changed, but the hustle stayed the same. And Jesus kept setting the bar for how street smarts, business moves, and a little love for the city could turn a hustler into a legend. When a hustler's run turns into a legacy, you can see it not just on the block, but in the culture, the style, and the way people speak the name with a little extra respect. Jesus Valentine didn't just stack money or property, he set trends, like the Jesus piece and the heavy ropes, which started popping up everywhere from rap videos to basketball courts. The way he mixed business with street smarts got noticed by old heads and young cats alike, and soon every hustler in Brooklyn, Harlem, and beyond wanted a piece of that image. The original Jesus piece wasn't just some random chain, it was a real badge of honor. Slick Rick, one of the most iconic voices in hip-hop, might have claimed the look, but people on the block knew Jesus was first, rocking big jewelry before the style became a citywide wave. Even crews that didn't run with him copied the stilo, because it meant more than flash, it signaled you moved different and that you put respect before drama. Jesus wore those chains not to stunt for outsiders, but to show love to the block, to give people something to believe in, and to protect his image as Harlem's most untouchable. Loyalty ran deep in the Valentine crew, and that code helped him outlast rivals who couldn't keep their own house clean. When John Bloody Hatchet snatched a profitable spot, the block waited for war, but Jesus let it go, seeing no reason to risk everything for a corner when his real empire was the network, the people, and the name. That move shocked some, but the streets saw the wisdom. Sometimes keeping your bag safe meant leaving pride at the door and living to stack again. He kept his circle solid, always checking in on family, showing up for birthdays, and paying respect to elders, making sure nobody could ever call his name dirty. Friendships with names like AZ Faison went deeper than money, with stories of Jesus saving lives, dropping real game, and teaching younger hustlers that the loudest voice in the room rarely lasts. People across Harlem, Brooklyn, and even up in the Bronx knew that if you needed a fair word or a strong hand in a jam, Jesus was the one to call, never asking for anything but respect in return. His ties to AZ and others gave him reach, making the Valentine crew known across borough lines, so even new players moving in had to pay homage. That network paid off as the streets changed, with crews getting smaller, technology bringing new threats, and police heat making the game riskier by the year. While others got caught up chasing fast money, Jesus put his focus on long money, buying more property, investing in local businesses, and making sure his family would always have a way out. The sneaker store on 138th Street turned into a landmark, and his real estate portfolio meant he kept earning even as old corners got too hot to hold. That was the mark of a new kind of hustler, one who could last when others faded out, and who kept teaching the next generation that the only real power was staying ahead. Stories about his discipline traveled further than the city limits, with people as far as North Carolina, London, and Tokyo hearing about the Brooklyn Puerto Rican who made it out and never forgot where he came from. Every move got studied, every loss turned into a lesson, and every victory shared with the crew. The code stayed tight: never talk to the police, never steal from your own, and never lose sight of what really matters. Even when some friends crossed lines or ended up in bad headlines, Jesus kept his distance, wishing them luck, but never letting the crew's name get pulled down by drama. As time rolled forward, the Harlem shop became a place for younger hustlers to get advice, build connections, or just sit and watch how a real boss moved in silence. Jesus never needed a big send-off because his run lasted longer than most, and his impact still rings out on every block he touched. The people who remember him tell the stories with pride, knowing he was one of the few who made it out, not just breathing, but winning, with family, friends, and a name that outlasted the old headlines. The legend of Puerto Rican Jesus isn't just a street tale, it's a blueprint, showing that brains, discipline, and loyalty can get you further than fast money or loud moves. Even the dirtiest gangsters respected him, not just for what he survived, but for the way he kept the game clean and the way he made everybody around him feel seen. That's the kind of power you can't buy, and that's why his name still holds weight in Harlem, Brooklyn, and anywhere hustlers chase a dream.